But variances are rare, and it has to be a serious hardship that you cannot even use the properties. That's why, an example of a wheelchair, you can't go into your house if you can't go up the stairs, right? Or perhaps the issue with the square footage, you can't actually build. Your land can just be used like for, I don't know, camping or something else like that. All right. Everyone get the gist of the variance, right? The key point is it's not anticipated in advance. It's done on a case by case basis. Now, there's a second element of the variance analysis, the second element. And the second element concerns the public interest, right? Would granting this one time variance harm the public interest? Would allowing someone to build a wheelchair ramp harm public interest? No, no one's going to care, right? Would allowing a house that's maybe a few feet too a lot that's a few feet too small to build? Probably not. But this is something very big. Imagine you grant a variance that affects a huge swath of the neighborhood, right? Or you can imagine building some sort of an apartment high-rise complex in a residential neighborhood. That may be a bridge too far. So variances are pretty rare. When you grant it, the courts usually deferential. So if a zoning board denies it, it's been pretty rare that gets reversed. We had a case like that from New Jersey. Of course, everything in New Jersey is legal. So the court just said, we don't care what the zoning board says. Okay, everyone with me? All right, the next type of flexibility talked about is the special exception. Special exception. You also see it called a conditional use permit, a CUP. I giggle every time I say it. There it is. My 5-year-olds in the room, right? A special exception or conditional use permit. This is different. This is not based on hardship. It's not based on balancing what's in the public interest. It's when the legislature in advance decides we will create an exception to the zoning code if certain objective criteria are met. So imagine a neighborhood is zoned as 2-family only, all right? But you can build an apartment building if you meet a few conditions. It's limited to a certain number of units. You have a certain number of parking spots and no more than so many feet high, right? So generally 2-family homes, but if you meet those criteria, you can build an apartment building. It's objective. You check a box. Do you have this many units? Yes. Do you have enough parking spaces? Yes. Are you so many feet high? Yes. If you can check those boxes, you'll get your special exception and you can build. Special exceptions are not designed to involve balancing. They're not designed to consider what's in the public interest, right? These are just very neutral things, almost like applying for a permit, right? To have a parade or something, right? They're not supposed to consider, well, is this parade really that important, right? Do you really need to protest or this or that? That's not in the government's power. Now, special exceptions, they'll have a trick. What happens if the legislature gives the zoning board the power to make discretionary calls? Like say, well, you can grant the special exception if it's in the public interest. They can't do that, right? The legislature cannot delegate to the zoning board the power to make discretionary decisions. With a special exception, it's not based on the public interest. It's very mechanical. And if the legislature tries, it's a violation of the non-delegation doctrine. Therefore, the delegation is invalid. So this always creates sort of a wrinkle for students who say, wait a minute, Josh, with a variance, they can consider a public interest? Yes. With a special exception, they cannot consider public interest? No. Right? So don't get this confused. All right? That clear up any doubts that may have existed, that may have lingered? Oh, and I forgot to mention, so spring break next week. Enjoy yourselves always. The Tuesday after spring break, I will not be here. I have to be out of town, unfortunately. So it's on the syllabus. So do not come here for that class. I guess you have the evening class. Maybe you're here anyway, but I apologize. So just so no one shows up and waits. No, I have to do a thing in DC. It's not. Oh, it is fun, but it's work. Everything I do is fun. It's sort of. I feel spoiled. I enjoy everything I do. It's even you guys. Yes, I do enjoy teaching. Even if I get frustrated sometimes, I do enjoy it very much. It's gotten better. Okay. Oh, he forgot his thumb drive again. He always does that. Sitting right there, glowing bright red. Okay, so let's lay his thumb drive. You'll get later. All right. What else? Okay, so I think we've got the gist of the variance versus special exceptions. Yeah, just don't confuse those on the exam or elsewhere. All right, so the next topic we have is how the First Amendment of the Constitution restricts land use. And have you all taken First Amendment or taking it now? Has anyone not taken First Amendment yet? Oh, okay. Who's taking First Amendment?
Taking it now.
Okay, you're taking it now. Have you done free speech already? Have we gone to religion? Where are you now this semester?
Still in free speech.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, usually free speech is the first 80% of the class anyway. Everyone's taking common law though, right? Okay, so this will be familiar to some, but not for others. The First Amendment is very short. It's a few lines. You'll spend an entire semester on this entire text. Basically, everything is on this. It's sort of crazy to think about. There are the five freedoms: the Establishment Clause, the Free Exercise Clause, the Free Speech and Press Clause, the Peaceable Assembly Clause, the Petition Clause. Almost the entirety of your First Amendment class will be on the Free Speech Clause. All right. So when I say freedom of speech, what comes to your mind perhaps is the spoken word. I am talking to you. I am speaking. Okay, that's free speech, right? Um, the printed word. If I write something on a piece of paper, perhaps use a printing press or even an iPhone or ChatGPT, right? Whatever it happens to be. That's an interesting issue, also, right? The printed word as well is protected speech. What about other stuff? Singing, art, painting, sculpting, dancing, nude dancing, right? There are various forms of expression that are not the spoken word, right? And the phrase we use in the law is expressive conduct. Expressive conduct. There's some conduct that is expressive in nature and that actually has some First Amendment protections. Now, the doctrine here is complicated. I'll walk through a couple of cases, which you'll study again in common law or sorry, First Amendment whenever you take it. You guys do the O'Brien test already? That sound familiar? No? Burning stuff?
Oh yeah, we're on that now actually.
You're on it now? Oh, perfect. Well, I'll happy to teach it then. Okay, good. Um, so believe it or not, the Supreme Court's three most famous cases involving expressive conduct, all about burning stuff. Burning a draft card, burning an American flag, and burning a cross, right? These are three cases where it was alleged that the act of burning something conveyed a message. You see where I'm going with the house, does it convey a message? All right, so the first case was from 1968, arose during the Vietnam War. Sure, all of you, or at least maybe most of you, when you were 18, registered for the Selective Service. Just ring a bell, right? Now it's probably all online. Back in the day, in the 60s, if you were a male over the age of 18, you had to register for the draft. And it would give this little card, a little piece of paper, a little cardboard piece of paper you're supposed to keep on you at all times. And this card would indicate your name, your address, and so on, also your draft status. So if for whatever reason the government found you on the street, they could say, "Are you dodging the draft? Show me your draft card." And you could show your card to make sure that you're in good standing. At the time, there were no computers, there was no Google, so there's really no way to have digital records. This piece of paper was your way of proving that you were not dodging the draft. Funny story, when I was growing up, I had a babysitter. Her husband served in Vietnam. He lost his leg. He had a metal pole for a leg. So he was in Vietnam for some time, then he was sent home. And again, he had a metal pole for a leg. And then so one day he was walking around and some military officer said, "Hey, you, where are you?" He's like, "Well, I'm walking around." I was like, "Why are you not in Vietnam?" I was like, "Well, he sort of kind of just just sort of making light of it. He's like, "Well, you know what, you're coming with me." And I think they actually from it was Ellis Island or somewhere else to do an interrogation, saying, "Why are you not in Vietnam right now?" Because they thought he was dodging the draft. And he just lifted up his pant and pointed to his metal pole. That's all it took, and he was sent home. So again, having this card was a useful piece of information to describe why you are perhaps not you're an 18-year-old man who's not in university, why are you not in the war, right? That's anyway. So then you have David Paul O'Brien, who was a anti-war protester who opposed the draft. He did not want to participate in the war. So what did he do? He went to the steps of the federal courthouse in Boston, and he lit his draft card on fire. This was a public act. Everyone could see it, right? He wasn't burning it to keep warm, right? He wasn't burning it to make light. He was burning it to send a message that he opposed the war and he opposed the draft. And the case goes to the Supreme Court. So you'll probably learn there's this 4-factor test. By the way, when the Supreme Court gives a 4-factor test, only one factor actually matters, right? It's just roll them. The court doesn't actually care about all the other factors. So the factor here that actually matters is, what's the government's interest? Is it about suppressing speech, or is there some other interest? Well, here the court said the government has an interest in maintaining records, and if people start destroying their draft cards, you don't have records to keep track of who's eligible for the draft. So there was a purpose that was not related to suppression of speech. Therefore, he can be convicted for burning the draft card, right? Now, of course, why did Congress ban destroying draft cards? They wanted to stop the hippies from protesting against the war. I mean, this is really obvious. And then everyone who's alive in the 60s knew this, or as they say, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there. Something like that. I think it's a Robin Williams line that he didn't make up, but he said it often. But again, the court explained that in some cases, burning something, conduct, can have expressive value. Right. The next case, did you do Texas versus Johnson so far? Okay, good. The next case is actually arose in, of course, Texas. In 1984, the Republican National Convention was held in Dallas. And then Gregory Johnson did what all Americans do with the American flag. He doused it in kerosene and burned it. Right? What else would you do with a flag? My goodness, right? Now, he did this, of course, to oppose politics and the Republican Party and everything else. This was his intent. Now, does anyone know the correct way of disposing of a flag? Burn it. The correct way of disposing of American flag. Oh, you phased me. Burning it. Yes, you were correct. Thank you. She said it. Burning it. You're supposed to actually cut into pieces. Attaway, right? You're supposed to cut into pieces and then actually burn it and then even bury the ashes. Right? There's an elaborate protocol. So there's some, irony that the burning of a flag is both the correct way of disposing of a flag and the absolute wrong way of burning a flag, of disposing of it, right? Because you're supposed to burn it, you're not. So a lot of it depends on the intent, right? If you're a Girl Scout burning a flag and then burying the ashes, great. If you're Gregory Lee Johnson burning the flag at a Republican convention, bad, right? So again, the question was, can this person be prosecuted? And Texas versus Johnson was decided on somewhat, it was a Brennan opinion, so nothing really matters. But I think sorry. But I think the argument was the reason why they were doing this was a viewpoint discrimination, right? Texas wasn't concerned with burning, other types of flags, but only flags that represent the United States, and they were targeting one particular viewpoint. The funny story was that Justice Scalia was the fifth vote, and Scalia would often hold this opinion as evidence that, look, see, even though I'm a right-wing nut job, occasionally I vote for the left, right? And you say I'm a right-wing nut job myself, right? I'm a good company, but occasionally he will vote in a way that goes against his political priors. And the story is that the day after this case was decided, he was sitting at the breakfast table with his wife Maureen, and she was reading the newspaper and saw about this case, and she started singing the national anthem in front of him, "Your Grand Old Flag," one of these songs, just to taunt him. And he's like, "Yeah, I got it. I'm going to leave. I'm going to work now." Maureen, she's still around. She's a remarkable person. Okay, so that we have O'Brien, we have Texas versus Johnson. The third case, RAV, involves cross burning, but not what you think. This wasn't a case where the Klan decided to erect a cross burning to intimidate people. These are a bunch of juveniles, right? So the case is called RAV. Whenever you see initials, that means juvenile because they don't name them in the court decision. So I don't even know what RAV's name is. He's probably in his 40s by now, 50s even if he was a kid in 1990. But he and his idiotic friends had an idea. They broke apart a chair. They tied together the legs of the chair. You see where this is going, right? They made a cross. Then they went to the yard of an African American family, planted the cross in their yard and lit it on fire. Okay. Now, they were not charged with trespassing or intimidation or a threat or anything like that. They were charged with a bias crime, that is, expressing hate and bias towards people, arousing anger, alarm, resentment on the basis of race. Now, you may not like this, but racist speech is protected, and the court rejected the prosecution. Now, if you actually threaten someone, and there's no evidence of a threat here in the case, but if you actually threaten someone, that is prohibited. So you can have a case where burning a cross with a terroristic threat can be prohibited, but merely burning it to elicit, anger or resentment, these sorts of things, is not. So there are a couple of cases. The other case was Virginia versus Black, was an opinion from 2000-ish involving cross burning. Okay, good. So these three cases, decided about 2 decades and change apart, 25 years apart, form the basis of the idea that some conduct is protected speech. So where does that leave us with a house? Right? Is a house protected speech? Well, what do we know? Putting signs in your window, okay, that's protected speech. Putting an art display on your front lawn, that is probably protected speech. Right? Painting a mural on the side of your house, that's probably protected speech. Building a house itself is trickier. Let me just give you just some practical reasons why. Every architect tries to convey a message, right? 100%. If you're an architect, you consider yourself an artist. If every single house conveyed a message, then you can never have an architectural review. And maybe that's the right answer. Right? Maybe this entire ARCOM stuff is bad. We should get rid of it. But if you actually take the position that if you convey a message to protected speech, then you can never deny a building permit on the basis of aesthetics. And, dare I say, Lochner, this would give the court substantial power to basically nullify almost any aesthetic-based restriction. But beyond that, when you look at a house, are you really thinking, wow, that's conveying a message? Or, oh, wow, that's a nice house. It's pretty, right? People disagree on this. And I don't really care about architecture, what do I know, right? I don't care what things look like. Doesn't matter to me. But some people, it's really important. Like Justice Breyer was on the jury of the Pritzker Prize, which is like the world prize for architecture. He really cared about architecture. In fact, when the Supreme Court locked off the front door for safety reasons, used to be at the court, you used to be able to walk through the front door, and they stopped that. They have to go through the sides. And Justice Breyer wrote a dissent from the decision to lock off the front door. Bless his heart. It wasn't really a dissent. That's what I called it. He wrote a statement dissenting from the decision to block off the front door. Bless his heart. I love Breyer. I miss him. He's actually in the faculty at Harvard now, and I hear he actually is asking lots of questions at the faculty meetings, just like he did at the court. So good for him. All right. So then we have our friends in Palm Beach County. Okay. Palm Beach has a building code, right? A zoning code like anyone else. The construction at issue here, right, by Mr. Burns, comply with the zoning code, right? Again, the construction at issue here by Mr. Burns comply with the zoning code. There was no zoning problems. His problem rested with the ARCOM, which the dissent thought was Orwellian in name, but it's like any government agency; they always have funny acronyms, right? The ARCOM has 7 members, including artists, architects, real estate, landscape architecture. Who knew that architecture and landscape architecture were so different? Who knew? When you're in Palm Beach, these things really matter. You ever been to Palm Beach, where Mar-a-Lago is? It's really, really wealthy. I can't afford to live there. Not even close. What's that?
West Palm across.
Oh, West Palm's easier. Oh, that's riff-raff, right? Yeah, but you're on the bay. You're not in the water. You're not in the ocean, right? Anyway, so the ARCOM has authority to ensure that new structures are in harmony with the surrounding area. Okay, what does that mean to be in harmony? The architecture must be compatible with the surrounding area. Various components have to be arranged harmoniously, so you can't have things that are sort of out of place. And So get this, you need a diversity of design that's complementary with the neighborhood. Just pause that one for a minute. A diversity of design that is harmonious with the neighborhood. So it's got to be different but the same. You're screwed, right? I mean, you're basically screwed. They can say whatever they want. It's not going to matter. It's like, oh, it's not diverse enough. Oh, you're too diverse, right? You're basically screwed, right? This is designed to give the government unfettered power to stop if they don't like what you're doing. And the dissent, man, I hate how they edited this case in the book. I sent the editors a very negative email. I told them to remove it from the book for the next edition. And they said they'll seriously consider it. So I take it at the word. But this book, like the dissent, is just livid, right? Saying this is Orwellian, that they're shutting this guy down, that they're a bunch of busybodies, right? The dissent's very angry. The majority's like, oh, nothing to see here. It's all good, right? Oh, actually, really, there's nothing to see here. That's why the case goes away. Think about that, right? There's nothing to see here. So dismissed. Yeah, that's good. I'll use it for next year. All right. All right. Anyone want to give me the facts here? Anyone read it? No? Hammer, please. By the way, is that in the case? Does it say he's a millionaire in the case? Yeah, you're right. You're right. Some of my other class also said he was a multimillionaire, but like that wasn't the case. But yes, you drew a reasonable inference. All right, go ahead. Well, the original was about, I think, about 10,000 square feet. Yeah.
Sauna, gym, pretty much like a wellness center.
Yeah.
And he went to the council denied him, and he went back to his architects, his gardeners.
Landscape, yeah, all these people. Let me just pause you for a minute, please. Why do you think he added all these trees and barriers and these walls, these other sorts of things?
He did it because the neighbors were complaining that it was going to be massive, so he wanted to kind of obstruct the view of it, so not to.
And didn't he get burned by that decision?
Right. So he came back with, I guess, the next meeting, after going through all this stuff with his landscape people and architecture. Basically, they still was going to be the big house, but I think he reduced the size.
He did?
20.
Oh, only 20,000 square feet. Yeah. Yeah.
Concrete type wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Neighbors couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I would think intimidated by the house.
Yeah.
But then the board ended up rejecting it again.
Yeah. Right.
Because they said, how can be artistic expression if no one can see the house?
Okay.
He's only covering the house because everybody.
Yeah. He's in a trap, right? He's trapped. Yeah, very good, Tamara. Thank you so much. So, I mean, okay, maybe the guy's a multimillionaire, but I feel bad for him, right? Because he built all these trees and coconut trees and palm trees and walls and gates to keep his neighbors from having to see it. He's thinking, all right, look, if I just block things off, no one's going to see it. I'll see it. I'll be happy, right? But then the decision to do that burned him because it turned out, well, if you can't see it, there's no message to convey. I'll get to the majority opinion in a minute. Usually, when a zoning board or an architectural board denies a permit, the correct sort of process is to appeal to state court, right? You appeal to the trial court. That's the right way of doing it. Not the right way, but the usual way of doing it. He did something different. He ran to federal court, and he filed an action under Section 1983, alleging a violation of his rights under the First and 14th Amendment. Now, there's some due process issues, some vagueness issues, which your book just sort of omits entirely, so don't worry about those too much. But the bulk of the opinion focuses on the First Amendment. The trial court actually went through a fairly detailed analysis and found that this purpose wasn't designed to convey a message, right? It's just architecture. It's a house. When it gets to the 11th Circuit, though, there's a split. And really, the majority opinion is so simple and so straightforward. That's why I tell them to take it out of the book. It's basically avoiding the constitutional question, right? Which we do. We avoid constitutional questions. We say, well, He made the choice to put all these walls and barriers and trees around his house, so the neighbors can't even see it. How are you trying to convey a message if people can't see it? Therefore, there's no expressive conduct. You lose. That's all, folks. That's it. And in a way, it's sort of I think of judicial craft, right? It's a smart judicial decision, right? Why are the 11th Circuit going to get involved in a very messy zoning issue and potentially strike down a zoning ordinance on First Amendment grounds when this is not the correct case to do it, right? If there's an argument that this issue doesn't even present the question. The dissenting opinion by Judge Marcus, which again they didn't include in your book, which is actually the good one that teaches something, walks through very carefully how this argument doesn't work. So first off, even if you can't see the house from the street, you can still see the house from the beach, right? He's not building all these barriers between the beach and his house. And even if you can't see the house from the street, he has guests, right? He invites guests. There are several guest rooms. That's in the record. And because there are several guest rooms, the guests can see his house, and that's enough. So what do we do with this? Well, I mean, look, when you talk about summary judgment, Rule 56, if a fact is not in the record, it doesn't exist. I think what the majority said is there's no evidence in the record he intended to show this message to his guests. It was his failure to make that argument in the lower court. Therefore, it's forfeited. This is a lesson for you all. If you ever do appellate work or trial work, doesn't matter which one, if an argument was not made in the trial court, it doesn't exist. Forfeiture is brutal. When you waive something, it's brutal. And this guy probably spent an absurd amount of money litigating this case, and the issue is forfeited. Then they sort of go into, well, even if you can't see the house based on context, its architecture, the sort of thing is to be protected. And this is where I think there's actually a difficult question. Should architecture be protected by the First Amendment? Without question, people put art, they put thought, they put care into architecture. It's a very difficult skill. But when you look at a house, you think, wow, that's conveying a message, or, okay, that's a different architectural style. That's actually a very difficult question. I think different people answer it differently. There's not clear precedent one way or the other. And indeed, Mr. Burns filed a petition for certiorari with the Supreme Court. Cert denied. The court wasn't interested. So this case is dead. All right, questions on Burns? Anything on Burns? I like the case, but just it doesn't actually teach you First Amendment law. There's nothing in there. They sort of reference these other 11th Circuit cases that no one cares about. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but that I don't care about teaching. I think there's a trend with casebooks and journals with the new fatty case and FADDY, fatty, not fatty, fatty cases. Like Willy Wonka will be canceled, right? The new fatty cases in the casebook, whatever's new, and that's not always good. Old cases are good also. In my common book, we have a supplement, and we have a policy that we avoid putting cases into the casebook unless they sort of simmer for a bit. They sort of just digest, because the case may seem really good in 1 year and then not so important next year. So we try to wait before we jam cases in. The big one with Dobbs, we're going to put in right away, but other cases we sort of let sift for a bit to see. By the way, have you ever actually bought a supplement? They have a supplement to the casebook with new cases. You ever actually buy that? Of course not. Our publisher is going to stop making them, stop printing them on paper, so we only electronic. Well, wait. So the way it works is if you buy the e-version of the casebook, you can basically do an upgrade fee to get the supplement cases right there inside your casebook. I think it's actually better than having this separate paper thing. They told me that the other day, so I have to deal with that. All right, any other questions on Burns? All right, so let's go back to, and again, I know I didn't give this to you with any advance notice, so I'll just talk about it, and I'll expect you to read it later when you have a few moments. All right, so when we talk about aesthetics, we ask ourselves, why can the government restrict what things look like? In other words, what is the government interest in restricting aesthetics? And so the answer is not because we want things to look good. That's not actually the answer. Instead, the answer is based on property values. Almost every type of zoning law at bottom is premised on maintaining property values. There's a fear. If one house looks different than other houses, it may lower the value in the neighborhood. Now, is this prediction accurate? Who the heck knows? If it proves inaccurate? Do they go back and give you a permit? Of course not, right? So it's completely made up. It's all speculative. But consistently, the courts have said maintaining property values is a legitimate basis for zoning. Maintaining property values is a legitimate basis for architectural boards, right? Keeping things looking harmonious, cohesive, and these other sorts of synonyms is a way of protecting property values. All right, everyone with me? Okay. So one of the core, it's sort of ironic, but one of the core aspects of the police power is maintaining property values. We'll do a case in 2 weeks when we come back. We call Mount Laurel, where basically you have a community that basically excludes people who are poor to keep property values up. I'm being slightly, facetious, but that's sort of the purpose of the regime. Okay. All right. So there are 2 cases I gave you. One from Missouri, State ex rel Stoyanov v. Berkeley, and the other one was from Washington, Anderson v. Issaquah. The first case involves, I'll show you the picture, a very wealthy suburb of St. Louis, Ladue, Missouri. Actually was wealthy. I don't know if it's still wealthy. Almost all the houses were 2-story conventional designs. Anyone know about architecture? Anyone have any expertise architecture? I don't. I have no idea. Colonial architecture, French provincial, English Tudor. I don't know what that even means. But these are traditional architectural styles. Mr. Stoyanov, however, wanted to build something novel. It was sort of pyramid shaped with a flat top, triangle windows, and then doors at one of the corners. And you see the garage is kind of under this canopy. So this very unusual design. Look what's next door. These are all very classic design houses. The law in this town said that you cannot have unsightly, grotesque, and unsuitable structures. Why? Having grotesque structures would harm property values. So you need to have all the houses look consistent with each other, which really stifles creativity. If you read The Fountainhead or perhaps any other book, if you can't build what you want, you're basically stifling your ability to design and innovate. But the purpose here is to keep things exactly the same. All right, so Stoyanov submitted an application for a building permit to the architectural board. All the members of the board were architects. They were very busy, I suppose. And they had their own views of what good taste was. And they denied the permit. This was a monstrosity. It would impair the value, would clash, would not be in conformity, not harmonious, and so on. Now, what's the argument that having this house here lowers property values? Well, imagine this house is for sale, and someone's looking to buy it. So, you know what? I like this house, but I don't want this one as my neighbor. This is weird. I don't want this one next door. So I'm not going to buy it. So then the property value of this one goes down. Is that actually true? Would you not buy a house because the one next door is ugly? Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Again, I don't ever this topic. I don't get because I don't care about these things. But maybe some people do. And again, it wasn't like a nuisance. There wasn't any sort of a violation of the zoning laws. It was purely based on something that looks like aesthetic. Someone in my chat actually wrote esthetician instead of aesthetic. I thought that was a good, funny typo. No, it's not estheticians. It's aesthetic value. Esthetician removes hair and TMI. Okay. So anyway, the government denied the permit, and then Stoyanov challenged it in state court. Okay. There were a couple issues here, right? First off, we often say that the zoning boards can't make decisions on what's in the public interest, right? We made that point before. With the exception of variances, it's not for the zoning board to decide what's in the public interest. But you know what the zoning boards can consider? Property values. And they can make decisions to keep property values up. I'm telling you, the entire basis of zoning law is to maintain property values and property taxes. It's stunning how much that pervades this entire chapter. Every single point is value, 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 keeping levels the same. Okay. So yes, in this case, the zoning board can consider property values. Okay. Then there's something called void for vagueness. Did you learn this in con law? Yeah, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I don't teach it actually in common law, so I'm glad some of you learned it. Uh, I don't do procedural due process. I know it's very popular. I just don't cover it. Just don't have time. The void for vagueness doctrine is based on a simple premise. If ignorance of the law is no excuse, people should know what the law says. It seems simple enough. So if a law is so unclear, right, so uncertain, then people can't be expected to know what it is. And then you can't punish them for failure to comply. There was an ancient Roman emperor, either Nero or Caligula, who used to keep the laws in a very tall column so no one could see them. So, oh, the laws are published, but no one can see them. This is in a Harry Potter movie as well, if you remember one of the Harry Potter movies. They put all these rules very high up that no one can see them. Okay. Was the statute void for vagueness? The court said no. There are several factors that the government can consider. And again, it comes back to property values, right? The board could consider how a design would affect property values. This was not arbitrary, but served everyone. So really, this entire case is, we don't want this case because it'll hurt property values. Whether it does or not, who knows? Now, even in Houston, there's some very odd houses. The one on Buffalo Speedway, the Darth Vader house. Everyone know where that is? Near Rice. It's actually on the market now for sale. And one of my students looked it up before, and they said they actually had to lower the price because it's not selling. So maybe people don't want weird stuff. I don't know. What do I know about architecture? What's that?
It was like $60.
My student said it was closer to 3 now, so they might have dropped the price. But kind of actually looks like this a little bit. Also, doesn't kind of like vaulted ceilings. All right. All right. So we're okay with that case again. Property values is for everything. That's all that matters. All right. The next case I'll mention is from Washington, and involves a different case, right? It's from Issaquah, Washington. Whoever Issaquah, Washington, somewhere. I don't know. I had a student from near there once many years ago. So you had a guy named Anderson who wanted to develop a lot for commercial purposes. He submitted an application from the city. He passed all the zoning ordinances, but then he needed to satisfy the architectural commission. The city had a code about what things had to look like. Let me give you some of the rules. Buildings must have appropriate proportions and relationships to each other. The colors must be harmonious with bright or brilliant colors. Huh? If there are bright, brilliant colors, how is that harmonious? Isn't that the opposite? All right. And it must be harmonious, but monotony shall be avoided. Huh? If it's harmonious, then it will be monotonous. But if it's not monotonous, it won't be harmonious. Right? So it's basically a trap, right? You can't actually satisfy these rules. So Anderson put forward a design with a modern style blue metal roof and a white stucco facade. And he submitted the proposal in December of 1988. And they said, sorry, that doesn't work. It doesn't fit the concept of the surrounding area. The colors were not compatible with the image of our town. We want more depth to the building. All right, so he comes back. And by the way, when he comes back with another proposal, that costs money. Right? When you force an architect to make another plan, that's not free. It's not like you get, he keeps doing it until you get approved. You pay for each design. So the one who wins in these cases are the architects. They always win. Whether they build a thing or not, they're winning. Okay. The new one had a metal roof, a brick facade with a gray and blue trim. They still had concerns. And one of the commissioners said, you know what? If you drive up and down the street, you'll see what's good and what's bad. And the facade just doesn't create the same feeling as the surrounding area. Now, at the time, what actually surrounds this place? Well, you look across the street. There's a gas station. There's another gas station. Some shops. Parking lot. Sort of coffee bar. And if you see closely, I think there's a veterinary shop, and there's a Valvoline. So, they had a vision of what was required here, but they didn't really tell the guys. You just drive around. All right, so he comes back with a third proposal. Now there's brick, wood trim, and an overhang on the building. Still, there were concerns. He said, look, driving up and down the block, I see different things. I see brick and wood and tile, but not much stucco. We use earth tones. We don't have contrast. And remember, the statue we want brilliant colors. You get a certain feeling. But finally, the commission said, you got to start from scratch. By that point, Anderson had spent 9 months and $250,000 in designs for a shop in a small town in Washington. And he said, we're not going back to the drawing board, and he just sued them. And he appealed the decision, the city council affirmed, then he sued the city in state court. He argues that the standards were unconstitutionally vague. There's void for vagueness, right? That laws can't be so vague that people are guessing at the meaning. So here, the court actually ruled in favor of the property owner. The city's regulations did not give meaningful notice about what the commissioners wanted, right? Nothing determines what's interesting, what's monotonous, what's harmonious. These words do not have a settled legal meaning. They're not technical words. Instead, the commissioner said, we get a feeling, right? We feel something. And how on earth can government officials convey what they feel? I know you feel, right? I feel your pain, right? It's not something that can be conveyed. And by the way, the word interesting, my least favorite word in the English language, has no meaning. Or you say, oh, that's interesting. You've not said anything. There's no actual meaning what you've conveyed. Or, oh, that's interesting. You're being sarcastic, right? I hate it. I hate that word. So neither here nor there. So they said that the commissioner should not be forcing people to guess at what's required. Therefore, it's unconstitutionally vague. Now, what can you do, right? Well, what some cities have done, they've actually have diagrams, schematics. These are the sorts of designs we're looking for. They can list different materials they're looking for. They can have a color palette, right? These are the colors we want to approve. If you give some guidance, people can follow it. But if it's based entirely on feeling, that's not enough. So in the end, the court says this policy is vague and unconstitutional. All right, questions?
In an example like that, what would a property owner receive, like as far as their damages to recover?
I think what he sees is this permit. Yeah, there's no, I'll get to your question, Zach, in a minute. When you sue the government, you generally don't get damages because of qualified immunity. So unless there's some clear violation of the law, there's no damages to be awarded. He might get attorney's fees under the state statute. I don't know what the state statute is, but he's not getting that $250,000 back. So he will get his permit and he can build. And he can build a John Moore paint store, as it were. Benjamin Moore painting store.
So as an attorney, can they fluff up the bill to hire?
What do you mean fluff up the bill?
We are rated normally $70. And then we raise it up because we know we're going to win $100.
Well, let me answer your question a couple different ways, right? First off, you have no idea you're gonna win, right?
No.
When you bill your client an amount, you have no idea if you're gonna win. So what some lawyers might actually do is they bill their client one amount, but they only collect part of it. They say, we'll collect the rest when the case is over, if we prevail. And if they prevail, they say, well, client, you don't have to pay us. We won't be paid by the city, right? If it happens that the client paid money to the attorney, the client actually gets a refund, right? So in other words, if you pay your lawyer money and your lawyer gets fees from the government, you gotta give it back. The lawyer can't double dip, can't unjustly enrich himself. Now, AJ made a point of professional responsibility. We do not fluff up our fees. That's not a thing that we do. Fluffing up fees is very bad. In fact, one of the quickest ways to get barred is by messing with your fees because it's objective. You can prove it. So if you usually charge, let's say $50 an hour, and then you bill your client $500 an hour, no way you're getting that much money, right? When you petition the government for fees, you have to prove what's your rate. And if there's evidence that you consistently charge X, and then you fluffed up your rate because it was a government case, they won't pay you that much. I had this years ago, and I do a lot of sort of con law litigation on the side, and I was getting attorney's fees in one case. And there was actually arguments, what's Blackman's hourly rate? I have a rate what I charge, but I'm not really a lawyer. I mean, I'm a lawyer, but I'm a full-time professor, so the government lowballed me on my rate. I was like, all right, and we eventually agreed on something that was fine, but it was much less than I charged. So no, you cannot fluff up your rate.
Well, I mean, I'm just on a hypothetical, like, let's say I normally charge 100 an hour, but I won't charge the client if we lose.
Well, that can be a contingency, right? But again, a contingency refers to damages, right? I mean, look, you could litigate a case with the expectation that I will never bill the client for attorney's fees. I'm only seeking them from the government. You can do that. That's risky, right? You can do that. But then you still have to establish what are the usual rates that you charge, and that'll be the basis with a little lodestar, right? How do you establish what an attorney's time is worth? And that gets into actually a lot of very nitpicky things. Like when you bill, this is why when you guys are absent from class, like kind of annoyed, your attendance is so important as a lawyer, right? That's all you got, right? Unless you're, a prosecutor or a DA or some government lawyer, you live in 6-minute increments. You have to account for everything you've done. And if you want to submit a bill to the government, what's the line? I spent 30 minutes on legal analysis. That's not enough, right? What were you analyzing? What were you doing? You have to have very detailed billing to justify it. You were on a phone call. Did you participate? Were you leading it, or were you just listening? Right? Not every government will pay for you to sit on a phone call if there's 5 other lawyers there. So billing becomes very tricky. That's actually why I don't really keep detailed billing records. I just don't care. I don't bill to anyone. It get hard when you're collecting fees. Okay. That came up a few minutes ago.
How do you feel about fascinating versus interesting?
I think they're synonyms. That was your question. Okay.
It was.
Okay. Thank you for the question. What else? All right. So, I mean, we're basically done. So that's all I got. And this is why I put these up 2 cases. So we have at least an hour. So let me wrap up. I'll turn the poll on. You can get this early start on your break. You can't go spring break quite yet, but you can at least get some time to get some dinner or something. So when we're talking about the First Amendment, keep in mind also the void for vagueness doctrine, because invariably a lot of these zoning codes may actually be so unclear that they actually violate the void for vagueness doctrine. All right. Anything else? No, let's out of here. Okay. I'll put the exit polling on. I'll see you all not the Tuesday after spring break, the Thursday after spring break. That's good. Yeah. Oh, not for a while. You can email me. That's fine. Yes, sir.
Professor, we do one of your practice exams. Will you give us feedback on it?
Yes, and I'm going to be doing the practice midterm. That one in April. If you want something before that, we can talk. No, that's on the Saturday. There's a practice final also that comes later. So I'm going to review a practice midterm on that Saturday, and a sample final in class on the last day of class. Yes, sir.